You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.
And welcome to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community. Again, I am your host, Ben Wolf. We're going to learn from our guest today how to use a peer advisory group to help you succeed in tough times. That is our basic topic. We're going to cover a lot of stuff that's particularly relevant now in the coronavirus, post-coronavirus, post-lockdown world, the new normal that no one knows what it is that we are living in now. And I encourage everybody to subscribe wherever you're listening to this on podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, including YouTube now. Follow and hit all instead of letting YouTube use its algorithms and let Big Brother decide which YouTube videos you watch. But so subscribe, leave a review, and it will make it better for yourself in the future to have access to this stuff that we are sharing here and give it more accessibility to other people in the future as well. So with that, I want to get into introducing today's guest. He is a Master Vistage Chair in Vistage NYC, which is a peer advisory group we've talked about before on the show. His is the second largest Vistage group or set of groups, group leader in the world, where he coaches and facilitates 7 peer advisory groups, all in New York City. He is an executive coach, and hopefully if I mess anything up in his intro, he can correct me afterwards, but he's an executive coach to CEOs, a TEDx speaker, founder, CEO, and has business experience expanding over 4 decades. You can find out more about him at his website, Mark Taylor, Mark with a K, Taylor.nyc. And with that, I give you Mark Taylor. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
My pleasure, and very happy to have you on. If I can, like I do with all of my guests, if you could just some of the stuff that's not in your resume or the introduction, give people like a quick 2-minute background on kind of where you come from, what's important to you, how you got to be, working with people on the kind of stuff you are today.
So I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I started my first business in 1976. And
I'll spare you mentioning how old I was at that time.
Okay, thank you. And that business lasted a total of 6 months before it turned into an utter failure that was just debilitating, because I invested every single dime that I had into that business. And I was just so depressed after that. I thought, well, I dropped out of college to start that business. And I come from near the Detroit, Michigan area, where everyone went to work for the factories, and very few of my fellow students went on to college. So I made it to college, and then I saw this business opportunity. I dropped out of college to start it, and I thought, some of these people with college degrees, they know something that I don't know. I must have failed because I'm not smart enough to run a business.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a job at corporate America. And they had an educational reimbursement program. I went to college at night. I worked full-time during the day. I eventually got my bachelor's degree, and I thought, what do I know now that I didn't know then? I mean, I must need more education. So I got an MBA. I got a master's in leadership. I did more educational courses than you can imagine.
Oh.
And by 1989, I had climbed up the corporate ladder and was very frustrated. And my wife said, why don't you start a business? And I said, well, really, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of failure. I mean, my first experience was horrible.
PTSD.
Yeah, exactly. And with her support, I started my second business, and I was the micromanager on steroids. It was a software business. I wrote the code. Even after I hired employees, I checked every line of code. I made the sales calls. Even after I hired salespeople, I checked every single proposal to make sure it was right. I checked every invoice to make sure it was right. I was working from 7 in the morning until midnight, 10 o'clock at night, almost every single day. And finally, somebody introduced me to Vistage, peer advisory board. And I went to a meeting, and I thought, wow, this is great. people around that understand some of the challenges that I'm going through.
Right.
I learned right away what the role of a CEO was, because I didn't even think of myself as a CEO. I thought CEOs were on Fortune magazine and the Wall Street Journal, not what I was doing, because I just had a small company at that point. And I began to own that role as a CEO, hired an executive team, learned to delegate, and I got my life back, because I say this with shame. The first 5 years of business, I don't even remember my 3 kids. I was working nonstop the entire time. I sold that business in 2005, and I wanted to become a Vistage Chair to help other business owners learn what it is to be a CEO, what it is to balance work and home life, and how to really make a contribution not only to their families and employees, but to our communities and society as a whole.
Right. And, and so actually that really gets into the first thing I wanted to ask you, which is relating to something that, we've talked about on the podcast before, quoting your friend, my mentor, Jonathan Smith, who was my EOS implementer when I was on the client side. And again, for those listening more recently, EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System, a comprehensive set of tools for getting maximum that you want out of a business. I'm an EOS implementer. I help other companies do that. And Jonathan Smith is my mentor now in that respect. And one of the things he writes in his book, Optimize for Growth, is that a leader needs 3 things to be successful: a coach, a peer advisory group like Vistage and others, and then a business operating system like EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and there's others of those as well. But then you really need all 3. So I guess what I wanted to ask you, from you being the best person to speak to about this really, is that if someone has any 2 of those, a coach and a peer group but no operating system, or a coach and an operating system but no peer group, or whatever, what if somebody has any 2 of those 3 but not the third, what are they going to be missing out on?
I as you mentioned 3 things, I think of a stool, and if you have a 2-legged stool, it's just not quite as stable as a 3-legged stool.
Mm-hmm.
So if you only have a coach, you get one perspective. I mean, Vistage has been around for 60 years. We've worked with over 100,000 CEOs, and we found that the highest performing CEOs had 3 things in common.
Mm-hmm.
One, they were part of a peer advisory group with like-minded professionals that can challenge the way that they're thinking. We just had an executive summit. We had Heidi Grant as a speaker. She's a social scientist, and she talked about that the higher you go up in the organization, the more blind you become. The more power that you have, the less that you really know what's going on. And that's a problem as CEOs become more powerful and the more successful they become, the less that they're able to see what their blind spots are. And that's the real advantage of a
and people below them may not speak up as much.
Afraid to speak up, and they want to tell you what you want to hear, which was my experience as a CEO, is that I didn't have a place where I could go for unbiased feedback and advice. I mean, I finally realized I didn't fail that first time because I'm not a smart guy or because I didn't have a college degree. I didn't have a group of peers to challenge my decisions and to ask me questions, to have me think at a completely different level. Now, a coach can do some of that. A coach can provide you with their perspective. I'm a certified coach. I learned that you're actually not supposed to provide advice. You're not a consultant. You're supposed to ask questions and have the person come to realizations and epiphanies and take actions out of that. And you can support them in achieving their goals and helping them design goals and designing systems for them to achieve those things. And I do that with my members because I also provide coaching to them. But if you only have a coach, you're missing not only multiple perspectives from a group of peers, because you're only getting one, but you're missing that opportunity to practice your leadership in a group, which is the other thing that we do in a peer advisory group.
What does that mean?
Well, we know from research, like from the book Mastering Leadership, where they've done 2,360-degree surveys, what are the competencies that create effective leadership? One of those is the ability to ask good questions,
Mm-hmm.
to be present, to articulate issues clearly. So these are the things you get to practice in a group. Are you articulating an issue clearly?
Mm-hmm.
Are you asking good questions? Are you listening? So everyone in the room gets to practice that, whether or not you're presenting an issue or not. And just so that you know, what typically happens in a peer advisory group is that people bring their problems, their issues, their challenges, their opportunities to get unbiased feedback. And we have a process where we ask them questions to discover if that's really the real issue, because many times it's not.
Right. A symptom.
So if you only have a peer advisory group and you don't have a coach, I think what you could be missing out on is some of that individual behavioral coaching. Maybe somebody's not holding you accountable to a specific goal. Maybe somebody's not helping you develop that goal. And maybe somebody's not saying, okay, you know, you're showing up for me right now as a know-it-all. And is that really what's serving you best? You know, what kind of impact is that having on the people around you? You know, how would you know if they feel like they're holding back and not, you know, sharing their truth? So I think that's what's missing there. And the third leg of that stool was an operating system. And I love the EOS system because, you know, businesses are like children. You go through different stages of development. You know, in the first stage, I think there's a book about the different stages, the life cycle of organizations by Adizes. You know, it's like the go-go stage, and you're the CEO and the founder, and you're doing everything. And then you get to the next stage, maybe you're into childhood and you hire a few people, but everybody's kind of doing everything. And then you begin to realize once you get to a certain point, and I think it's like maybe around 5 million in revenue, that you need to start creating lanes. And that's what a business operating system does, is it has you look at your organizational structure. It has you create systems so that people stay within their lanes and begin to operate on a predictable basis, because what you're looking to do to really go to the next level, to be a valuable organization, is you got to have some predictability. You got to be able to predict what your sales are going to be. You got to be able to predict your marketing results. You got to be able to predict your quality. You got to be able to predict, you know, your employees and the workloads. And that's what a business operating system does for an organization.
Right. That's super interesting and helpful. I'm glad you addressed all three scenarios. I guess what I wanted to ask next was to go from like that high level to like more concrete. Like let's just talking more specifically if someone's lacking the peer advisory group, like getting more concrete or specific, like what are specific mistakes that people are making now without that? Maybe stories, examples, but like what are some specifics about the mistakes and what people are doing wrong now because they are blinded, you know, that lack of peers or multiple peers to run things through? So
I remember, and I'll give some personal examples, I'll share from experience. I wanted to, you know, take a look at a new technology and invest in it. And of course, my vice president of engineering was all excited about investing in this new technology because he loved new toys, and technology is kind of a toy. He loved the idea. And what kind of advice did I get? This is a great idea. Let's go for it. Of course, it was my money that I'm investing. And when you're a founder entrepreneur, it's like what comes out of this pocket to go into this pocket, in my case, was like my children's college education that I was borrowing in order to bet that this technology was going to have a return on investment.
Right.
So who's going to tell me that it's a bad idea?
Right. Not your head of engineering.
Not my head of engineering. Everyone else, the head of sales, the vice president of sales, new technology to sell, new opportunities to make revenue.
Right. And even your coach, right? They're not going to know the substance of it. They're facilitating you.
Right.
You know.
Exactly. So that's when a peer advisory board can, you have 16 people there. Somebody's going to have a contrary opinion. I mean, what we believe is that CEOs are in the business of making decisions. And the more complex the decision, the more useful it is to gain some outside perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
If you were looking at buying an apartment in the city, you might see a place, you might like that place, but then you might go for an expert perspective for a broker to see if it's, being offered at a price range that's competitive to the market. You might go to a lawyer to help you look at the contract. You're going to get some outside perspectives. And that's what we do in a peer advisory group, is you get other people's opinions. Many times you'll see somebody over here with this opinion and arguing for this solution or whatever their advice would be, and somebody over here arguing something different, and you could have a third one. And so it's like they're all arguing your issue. It's like the conversations that you have in your head are being argued out loud, and you begin to see, oh yeah, or maybe somebody's coming up with an argument you didn't even think of, and you think, oh, I should take that into consideration in making my decision.
So if I'm in a room like that, how do I avoid like paralysis by analysis if there's so many voices?
One of the benefits of Vistage is that they have professional facilitators called Vistage Chairs. That's
right. You're not just on your own with your friends talking about this.
Right. I'm there to facilitate the conversation. A group of 16 are going to have multiple issues, so I'm paying attention.
It can get out of hand.
Yeah, it could easily get out of hand. In fact, before I even joined Vistage, I joined another group, a CEO roundtable, that didn't have a facilitator, and that's what it was. It was everyone talking, and the squeaky wheels got the grease, and the extroverts got all the attention. And if you were a little introverted, you didn't get to
right.
even talk much. But that's my job, is to facilitate the conversation so that it's moving forward, that we're asking good questions, that we're looking at deeper issues, that we're seeing, what emotions are coming up, what the impact is, not only on dollars and hours, but emotions and relationships. And sometimes we'll even go deep to find out that this is some self-limiting belief that somebody has that might be getting in their way, might be sabotaging what their values are, or what their goals are, and what they're committed to achieve.
And as a trained facilitator, I mean, you're more equipped to call out those things than regular civilians, regular civilians. And what about, I guess the other thing, which is when you have, as a facilitator, when you have, let's say, not enough, but let's take the opposite scenario. There's not enough pushback. People are just complacent about something, or not, I don't know, maybe not engaged enough, or not willing enough to speak. How do you get people out there to challenge each other if I don't know, or maybe that doesn't happen so much in a group like this, where people are not sufficiently engaged?
Well, one of our core values is challenge. And I've also had the opportunity as a Vistage speaker to talk to about 100 different groups in 3 different countries and throughout the United States. And I can tell you that my Manhattan groups, challenge is not an issue.
Right. Maybe other parts of the country we could
other
find.
parts of the country, Canada,
where I come from in Nashville, maybe that's more of a challenge.
Yeah, people want to be nice, but here, another one of our values is care. Sometimes I have to encourage them to be more nurturing in their challenging.
Right. No, I hear, right. We are talking about New York City, right?
Right. But if it were to happen, as a facilitator, then I ask people, and I will ask the introverts, I'll say, Ben, I haven't heard from you. What's your perspective on that? And sometimes the introverts are the ones that are thinking of it, and they come up with something that's just so brilliant.
Right.
This conversation's gone on for 15 million minutes, and it's like, wow.
Right. Well, another instance, I guess, where having that facilitator there is different than if you were talking about it with your friends or whatever, where it could just take over, and not have that perspective because you don't have that professional facilitation. I guess just before we run out of time, we got about, around 9-10 minutes left. I want to talk about this post-lockdown world a little bit also. We're getting into a world of uncertainty. New York City recently entered phase one. Business leaders around the country are entering, more advanced stages of reopening post-lockdown. I guess the first thing I'm wondering is, like, you're working with a lot of business owners, so this is a great chance for me and our listeners to pick your brain on this, but what's the biggest thing that's on people's minds that have businesses like in the trenches right now? What's the biggest thing that's on people's minds that people are worried about?
It's interesting, and I don't know how soon this will be published, because I've gone from monthly meetings to weekly meetings with my CEOs, and the issues and the biggest thing on their mind changes from week to week to week to week.
Wow, right.
First it was, the Family Leave Act, and what does that mean? And then the PPP came available, and then the banks ran out of money, and then what do we do? And then we found alternate sources. 100% of my members got the PPP money as a result of these weekly conversations.
Wow.
So then it moved to, how do we get forgiveness? And now the forgiveness rules are changing, and then we've had, the protests. The last 2 weeks have been about returning to work. What are the requirements? What do we have to do to be safe? What's reasonable? Do we take people's temperatures? Do we have some sort of a survey of whether or not they have, the symptoms of COVID? When to open? Like, some people could do it right now. Phase 2 is probably going to be around the first week of July. Should we open? Some people are really looking at, wow, this remote working isn't so bad. Maybe I don't need as much space when I go back to work. Others are like, how do I get my people back to work? They like working at home, but I want them in the office.
Right.
Those are some of the issues that I've been hearing.
That's top of mind. So it's interesting, because I was wondering if you were going to say whether it was cash, or sales that are in the pipeline, or, and that's not, it's interesting, I didn't give you any prompts, but like, that's not what I guess is top of the conversations right now, which is
cash and sales are definitely part of the conversations. I have some people that are in the restaurant business, hotel business, really are suffering. Some that we're going to open up like a week ago for outside service for takeout, which is permissible, and then we had the protests, and they ended up boarding up the restaurant and not opening, and cash is definitely dwindling. PPP helped out a lot of people to make it over this temporary period of time. So within that conserving of cash, the conversations about, do I lay off employees? Do I ask them to take a reduction in pay? Do I eliminate bonuses? What expenses do I cut? What expenses are essential versus non-essential? All of those are included. There's just so many different conversations.
Yeah. There's a ton of issues.
Yes.
So I guess here's another thing I'm wondering is and the truth is I could send you this information afterwards, but I actually know somebody who developed a program for testing and tracking of employees. They send people to the office for the testing and actually have a whole program to help people get compliant and feel safe and everything. If you want me to send you the information on that afterwards.
Yeah, that would be great, because figuring out how to do that, we have some.
Yeah, people have developed, entrepreneurs develop things in response, and so I know somebody that's going through the ceiling, this program that they developed, because people need to open up and they need to be safe, they need to test, they need to track, and they just kind of made this out of the box thing where they do all of that.
And have they checked it out? Because we have lawyers as in our group, managing partners of larger law firms here.
They're affiliated with a 70 or 80 location medical practice. So I don't know the details, but I'll let you ask that question when you speak with them.
Because one of the questions is, can you take a temperature and then you write their name down, what their temperature is? Is that legal to have?
Right. Well, this program I do know that they've addressed all the HIPAA issues and security and privacy and all of that. But So getting back to the questions at hand, though, one thing I want to know is who have you seen has fared badly? I mean, obviously, there's things completely outside of anyone's control, but maybe things that people could have done something about, or they could have pivoted and didn't. Who's done
Oh,
badly now? Obviously, putting aside things that are completely outside of anyone's control, which are many. Who's done badly that could have done better?
you know, that's what we work on, is brainstorming sometimes on things that people can do, and some people have pivoted remarkably. I have one member that is a manufacturer of like safety harnesses, that pivoted into making masks and marketing masks in time.
Right.
I would say the ones that have not done as well as they could, badly in your words, haven't done anything to pivot. They have the same product line or the same service, and the demand for that service or product line has dwindled,
Bottomed, yeah.
and they don't know what to do. I have somebody that manages events. It's an event business, and their big event.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, Jacob Javits, and they make almost 100% of the revenue, and it was canceled. But they've pivoted to an online world, but it's still not bringing in the revenue of face-to-face convention or trade. Certainly, the nightclub business is done devastated. The hotel business is devastated.
Right. Physical plants, physical locations, such expenses associated with that. Even the event business, I guess they don't have their own physical space. So there's not that much built-in expense that they can't do anything about. As opposed to a restaurant or retail, or if it's your event space, like Jacob Javits itself, let's say, the event space itself, I know there's Amazon loft in downtown, and there's all these event spaces. So
right. I mean, Jacob Javits pivoted to be a hospital.
That's true, right? That's true.
Yeah, and my retailers, their sales are down substantially. I mean, what they're doing. Some of them that are doing better than others have ramped up their online presence and online sales.
It's really interesting. And so that was actually going to be my next question, which was, some of the good ideas and some of the things that people have done that have done better. And it sounds like what I'm hearing, the common denominator, which is pretty intuitive actually, is whether you're pivoting, whether you're listening and watching and being realistic and excuse me, paying attention to what's actually happening around you, and not wishful thinking, or not frozen by indecision or fear. That makes a difference.
Right. I have an architecture firm, a fairly substantial one, and obviously a lot of the projects have been reduced. And what he pivoted to is he's created ways to make it safe to go back to work. So he's got systems, and they're systems that actually kill COVID, like dry hydrogen peroxide dispensers. And,
like actual machines. Okay.
HVAC systems, and designing offices to be COVID safe. Faucets in bathrooms and doors that you can wave your hand.
You don't touch.
You don't have to touch, and different types of glass enclosures, so that you can sit in an open office environment and still have glass around you protecting you, keeping you at a safe distance, as well as signage on which way to face in elevators, and directional flows to keep people from touching one, getting close to one another.
Wow.
So that was a great pivot that can make a huge difference for people.
Right. Well, it makes a lot of sense, and I definitely see how, especially during the fast changes, everything that's happening, and different things being on your mind every week, how having more people that are your peers, not just your employees or even your leaders under you, and even just one coach can, obviously it's clear from the stories you're telling how that makes a difference in being successful in this constantly changing, market and world that we're living in. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking about that. Again, people can find out more about Mark Taylor, Master Vistage Chair at Mark Taylor, Mark with a K, marktaylor.nyc. And Mark, just really appreciate you coming on and teaching and sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And we'll see everybody else on the other side. Thank you.
You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.